Okay, so this is our very last webinar for this webinar series and for Garden Puerto Rico and Ars Electronica, at least for the time being. And our last webinar is by Jorge Valentine, and it's titled Education for the Future. A little bit about Jorge. Jorge Valentine is the director of the STEM program at the Puerto Rico Science, Technology, and Research Trust. And he is a PhD candidate at the Ana G. Méndez University. Thank you so much for being with us. Jorge is a colleague of mine from the Puerto Rico Science, Technology, and Research Trust. We are incredibly grateful and appreciative that you are with us today. Thank you so much for your time. Really excited to see what you have for us. So thank you once again, and whenever you're ready, the stage is all yours.
One of the major barriers that we tend to find when speaking about education in Puerto Rico, and education everywhere for that matter, is trying to define the future. Specifically, trying to define what the future is or when it is. Because future tends to have this nice quality of being eternally imminent, but at the same time supremely distant in popular imagination. Think for a second about the phrase, our children are the future, and you will start to encounter many ways of coming about these questions. Like, for example, when do these children of who are the future stop being the future? And when is the future here? You'll be eternally rethinking that statement, like as if you were in a Christopher Nolan movie. Because the same thing happens with considering the role of education in general. Education is framed in the idea of the future, but it's never catching up to the future. That is perhaps education's biggest challenge. How do we actually think about education for the future when it is eternally the present? This presentation doesn't have a silver bullet to solve the problem. My intention is more to offer the pondering of actions that could anchor the notion of that eternal future, allowing us to think about the tools that we have today to make the necessary changes to actually be able to engage the future with weapons of the future. And that leads us to the first question. Where are we? In 2016, Carl Schwab argued that we are at the beginning of a fourth industrial revolution that is characterized, as some of you should know, by the prevalence of the internet, smaller and cheaper sensors, as well as increasingly ubiquitous artificial intelligence and machine learning. That first industrial revolution was led by the inventions of things that perhaps we take for granted today, such as the steam engine, the rail transport, and the beginning of mechanical production. The second industrial revolution brought with it more concrete items that provide us with other benefits on a daily basis. And I think of the availability of electrical energy, or the mass production line that makes what we eat or what we wear viable. The third industrial revolution is closer to us. It was made possible through the development of semiconductors and circuits and the use of new materials to enable development of computers. First, giant apparatuses that took whole rooms that began getting smaller and smaller until making them personal computers. That third revolution is also the one that opened the door to the exploration of space and the ability to communicate distant points on the planet. It's not strange to us what this third revolution was because it's closer to us. This is the one that our parents lived. If you are the child of a baby boomer, it has been a gradual and imperceptible process for you. Each technological advance has made our environment better and more connected. But I want to bring your attention to the speed at which this rate in technological advancement has come. And I know that many of you perhaps already know this, and I'm trying to speak to those who are not connected to these sort of topics or have not pondered necessarily on the foundations of what education is. And not only education, but human development in general. Think about this. It took men about 1700 years to invent a steam engine. It took us 109 years, more or less, between that invention and the advent of mechanical production. 94 years before the advent of the semiconductor that made power computers possible, but only 34 years before the advent of the age of internet. To better understand this, I've taken the liberty to reproduce to the best of my abilities this graph that's available on the book The Second Machine Age by Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the names. This graph illustrates the increase in humanity's development index and how this index brought with it the challenge of keeping up with other elements of society. In our case, what we're pondering right now is education. If you look at the chart, you'll see that it was a kind of a slow start for humans. We had only a few years to develop. But as we progressed, as we made discoveries, scientific discoveries, as the doors of the Americas opened for Europe, the world began to communicate, we began to invent machines. There was quite some change in that index. The mind-boggling aspect of this is just how the spike goes suddenly up some 800 points in the Human Development Index, which is quite remarkable for the story of human beings, but should pose the question to everyone that reads it or encounters this graph: how will we keep up with such human development? And more importantly, is today's education able to keep up with the challenges that such human development presents societies in general? Because regardless of buzzwords, curricular revisions and avant-garde thinking and modern buildings, the problem is still the same. Our modern school, our actual schools, are a product of the 1800s and the Second Industrial Revolution. And don't get me wrong, not everything is evil or bad in this system. It had many good things, particularly when you're coming from monarchies and economic systems that were still being overthrown in the 1800s. This industrial model of education opened the system to everyone. Free education was available. No more having to resort to a tutor or a denomination or an academy or an exclusive entity to acquire some sort of literacy. It also standardized the way in which an entire society could be prepared by making literacy available to all its citizens. And that's something quite subversive for the time. But it also brought us subdivided student bodies divided by age cohorts and not by competencies, skills, or interests. In its own way, the education system provided a one-size-fits-all solution for the Human Development Index that was available or that was prevalent at that time. In America, the educational system from 1840 onwards started propagating the common school model that presented certain problems for universities and organizations in the long run. 1892, the then president of Harvard, Charles William Eliot, formed a group of 10 of the most important universities and organizations in the United States to organize the school curriculum. And that is the first known reform performed by the Committee of 10, which brought us stuff like physics offered in 11th grade or geometry in 9th grade, and that there should be 12 years of study and 8 should be in primary school and 4 in secondary school. So you see, the system was trying to build its own resources and solutions to the needs that arose for the type of development that society had at the moment. But these societies never face the challenge of having internet or social networks or the amount of information available at the tip of your hand. So how are we trying to solve this now in the education frontier? STEM education, which is our answer to educational reform and trying to catch up with the speed of human development. The thing is, we need to be clear on what STEM are we talking about. And before I continue, I think it's convenient to explain where the term STEM comes from and the original vision for it. It originated in 2001 within the National Science Foundation offices when the Director of Human Resources officially used the acronym to refer to the necessary curriculum for teaching skills aligned with National Science Foundation goals and the necessary areas of skills and knowledge that future NSF employees needed to bring to the table. Since then, everybody is using STEM to identify science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and it has been adopted by national, state, and local levels to focus the language of educational reform as a whole. The largest of these reforms, and which still governs the pace at which work is being done locally in America and in Puerto Rico. The acronym is America Competes, which was originally signed in 2007 and reauthorized once again in 2010 and reauthorized in 2018. It promotes better science education in general in the United States and primarily focus on funding for research areas such as physical science. It also focuses on increasing educational opportunities in the STEM fields, making these areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics a priority. Since its inception in 2007, is one of the few initiatives signed by all presidents to date and endorsed by the two legislative bodies in the United States. So this goes to show you the extent and the breadth and the depth that America Compete has on general education and how it's designed to give some grasp on the pace of the future. But the challenge again with STEM education is it's the way we understand it, the way we talk about STEM, because it depends on the place and the context where we are. And we have found out that STEM education as a concept is not tautology, you know. In other words, naming it doesn't evoke the same reality in each of the minds that listens to the concept. As a matter of fact, in 2013, Roger Bybee observed that there are about 8 notions about what STEM education actually is, and these range from STEM as a single discipline to STEM as a reference for the subjects of science and mathematics, passing through STEM as an independent discipline incorporated into other subjects, and as a discipline integrating new letters to the acronym to try to specify ideas and aspirations for the future. But then again, it's not something concrete, and these notions tell a story to which we must pay attention. We cannot define what STEM education should be. So if we cannot define what it is, we might very well not be able to define its purpose either. And there lies the difficulty of STEM education as a silver bullet or a solution for the education conundrum that we face towards the future. Another piece of the problem, and perhaps this is the final one that I would like to present, is the idea or the question of what are actually the skill sets that are going to be needed. We don't know for sure. In the future, we might need people like intelligence increased technicians or cyber companion psychologists. We're not sure about what the skills are going to be because we don't know the needs of the future. So the discussions that are taking place not only in academia but in the areas of workforce development are questioning specifically what do we give our children of the future as tools and skills to wrestle with what's to come. So in this final section of my presentation, I would like to leave you with a few ideas of what would be switching gears and trying to engage the future, not from the standpoint of facing the future 2 years from now, but facing the future in the long run. So, what should education for the future consider? First of all, we should focus on soft skills. Yes, it's easy to say, and it's even a trendy term nowadays. Everybody's talking about soft skills and how soft skills are key for professional development of our students. But if you think it through, you could understand that herein lies the key questions to true innovation. I mean, what are soft skills? Soft skills are transferable skills that relate to how people work, how they communicate, how they manage time, how they engage difficulties or handle deep questions. So yes, they are not substitute for just specific training or for defined profession. Yet they are highly sought after skills that mean a world to employers because they are the key to adapting to changing environments. Without these soft skills, engaging in whatever professional discourse you would like to engage is not possible. It's no wonder that schools where tech entrepreneurs and these giant technology giants send their kids are more focused on soft skill development than technology itself. I mean, there's a limit to what technology can do while playing, learning to write, experiencing leadership and thinking through analog problems and questions. These train the brain to engage with challenges differently. The thought behind this is that technology will come, you will assume the control of technology or you will learn a technological skill, but getting to know people, to think, to act with an innovator's mindset, it's far different and needs nurturing and practicing from very early on. Since these skills are more akin to emotion and habits of mind, the school of the future would need to allow ample time for students to practice creativity, active listening, empathy, problem solving, and critical thinking in a focused and deep manner, and more profoundly than just making sure that everybody has a computer. It would be more important to make sure that everybody can actually think and work together. Another aspect would be to make certain that differentiated learning actually happens. And this is the spot where spouse theories and working theories collide in the educational world. We like to think and repeat ourselves that we are making differentiated learning happen. Actually, it is not that way, and we're leaving it to the realm of rote learning and memory with little application and little or less attention to the differences among students, because there are differences amongst our students regardless of how alike we find them to be. Our systems are rigid when it comes to adjusting teaching and learning methods to accommodate a child's learning needs. And this happens all throughout a student's lifetime. This, as I commented before, is a result of the production line approach to education and how teacher preparation programs are rehashing the same strategies and tactics without really much else changing. From socioeconomic status, gender, motivations, disabilities, learning styles, and personal interests, we are working with a diverse group that acquires, processes, and constructs knowledge in different ways than perhaps you or I did when we were in school. Thus, students should be enabled to learn at their own pace. As educators, we must place urgency on questions and projects as the basis for actual practical learning where each individual can shine. Furthermore, this learning must be facilitated by a teacher that understands and practices lifelong learning and be able to model it for students. On a final note, and this is perhaps the most radical of the ideas that I will bring today, is to do away with the boundaries of high school, college, and workforce. The typical question any teenager, high school, or college student speaking with an education advocate like me tends to go something along the lines of, so, what do I need the Pythagorean theorem in real life for? Or, hey, what's the point of the perfect square trinomial? And perhaps you know this answer. I certainly don't. I'm not a specialist in mathematical areas. Furthermore, let me ask you this. When was the last time that you personally used it in real life? And when kids ask these questions, they're right. They're onto something. They're onto the fact that school curriculum dedicates a significant amount of time teaching content that most students will not use in life and will not broaden their academic acumen. When these children that once were the future, might be the present now, question the applications of anything in their curriculum, they're right. They're right to question. The fact that school curriculum is designed with college as a destination. I don't know if you remember that committee of the 10 that we spoke about at the beginning of the lecture. We're speaking about having students go to a certain point in college. But as adults and workers, we know that college is not the only destination a student will face in the future. Students will most likely need a job when they move out of school or college. And for that, we're not preparing them that well. So why not begin setting up students for that future from early on? Why don't we, instead of thinking about grades and courses, subdivisions, and classes, we use high school as an opportunity to learn and practicing possible careers while we acquire stackable credentials, certificates, and post-secondary preparation? Why don't we base our models instead of by grades, instead we use competencies and competency levels per grade on several disciplines? Why don't we include credits that everyone can transfer to college after high school? And let's think about heavy financial literacy and soft skills that cannot be taught in once a year 2-hour workshops before lunch. I think that's the most radical idea. There are several groups moving ahead with such process of blurring or doing away with the lines between high school, college, and the workforce. And if we think about the rapidly moving Human Development Index, we should be wiser to think about this disappearance of and subdivisions in high school as one of the first steps to making education more agile in meeting the needs of the current students, but also agile in meeting the needs of the future. In total, we can summarize this presentation that I've made by presenting a little bit of where we are on our journey towards meeting the future of education and how we have thought about STEM as an alternative, but also making a statement about how radical our thinking should be in terms of how school is structured and how fast the world is moving, and why education hasn't always been able to meet the question of the future head on. I think these are urgent conversations that educators, industry leaders, politicians, and everyone should be asking themselves when thinking about education. Because once we solve these and set clear path for the future, we might be certain to solve other problems that are endemic to education, like teacher preparation, teacher evaluation, budgeting, and school quality, school structures, buildings, and such other key areas that tend to worry people about the present because we're thinking that we are actually considering the future. If you have any questions, my name is Jorge Valentine. I am the STEM Education and Workforce Development Director for the Puerto Rico Science, Technology, and Research Trust. Thank you very much, and you have a great future.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Once again, everyone, if you have any questions for Jorge, you can contact him directly. We will not be having a live Q&A today. If you are unable to contact him, you can always contact us directly, or more like my boss, Dr. Johnny Lugo, who is the coordinator for Garden Puerto Rico. You may email him to this email address, and he will make sure to send any questions you have or forward any questions you have to Jorge or to any of our other panelists. And that is it. We are officially at the end of Garden Puerto Rico's webinars. Thank you for being with us these 3 days. Thank you so much to Ars Electronica for giving us this virtual space so we can be in contact with all of you incredibly fine people. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the Science, Technology, and Research Trust, to the Cultural Heritage Innovation Program, to my boss, Dr. Johnny Lugo Vega, and to absolutely everyone who made this event possible. But most importantly, thank you. Thank you for joining us, for watching our content, for being here and showing your interest in art, technology, society, and at the end of the day, culture. My name is Shirley McFall. It's been my absolute honor and privilege to be your hostess for this webinar series, and I hope to see you all again very, very soon. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, a great rest of Ars Electronica, and hasta pronto.